It's not unusual for a mentor character to die in a story arc. It's a bit of a cliche because it's a very effective way of moving the story forward and eliciting emotion from the viewer. It raises sympathy for the protagonist, it raises hatred for the villain, and most importantly, it raises the stakes of the story in the viewer's mind, because what consequence can be graver for a character than ceasing to exist? And of course, killing a mentor character can drive new plot points, such as how will the protagonist cope with this situation? Will he be forced to mature, or will he spiral down into crippling depression? Not to say that I particularly enjoy this cliche, or that it's always well executed, because it's not, but here in Jujutsu Kaisen I think it was pretty effective, and generally speaking I think the killing off the mentor cliche can be quite entertaining. So in the most recent episodes of Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, when Nanami was fire blasted in the face, I was certainly surprised at its suddenness, but I thought it made sense from a narrative perspective. And then when Nanami proceeded to survive and heroically fight off transfigured humans while he's imagining that he's at the beach and not at work, quite relatable until the very end, only to be finished off by Mahito in front of Yuji. As a viewer, I was horrified, but the storytelling appreciator in me thought, ooh, this is spicy, I'm enjoying this. Then Mahito also proceeded to turn Nobara's face into a donut, which raises a question: is there too much spice now? Can too much spice ruin this narrative dish? From what I've been reading online from the latest episodes, some people are loving Shibuya Arc, me included, while some people think that it's a bit too much. So let's delve right into the latest episodes of Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2. Up until now, Shibuya Arc has been a very intense roller coaster. I can definitely see why the manga readers were very eager for this to be animated. Every episode is so eventful, it feels like every week you're being bombarded with something new happening, and this obviously has its pros and its cons. The pros are obvious. When you have a very frenetic, action-packed story and you combine that with gorgeous animation, you get a weekly series where every episode is an absolute banger! Every episode is extremely entertaining and it's far from boring. Jujutsu Kaisen can be very chaotic, but it sure knows how to grab your attention. It's so funny that this is airing on the same season as Frieren. Sousou no Frieren also has very brutal moments and gorgeous animation, but it's relaxing, it's a very pleasant experience. Sousou no Frieren like pats you on the head and makes you feel all these fuzzy nice feelings, while Jujutsu Kaisen grabs you by the back of your neck and just RAAAAAH! So visually speaking and from an entertainment aspect, I do think Shibuya Arc has been a 10 out of 10, but I don't think that the overall package has been perfect. I made a previous video saying that I thought that Gojo's flashback arc was a bit too fast-paced, and I do think the pacing is better, it's a bit slower now, but it's still very frenetic. I think for the flashback arc, the author mostly wanted to focus on the important things, like Gojo and Geto's relationship and Gojo's transcendence, I guess, and mostly wanted to speed things up. Keep in mind, this isn't anything that I read, this is just my intuition from having watched it. Shibuya Arc is just a bit slower paced than the previous one. It lets moments breathe more, it has more character interactions that give dialogue to contextualize most of what's happening, and most importantly, it features characters that we already are very familiar with, so there's more emotional depth to our connection to them as viewers. Instead of being super fast-paced like previously, although this arc is still pretty fast by normal anime standards, whatever that means, this arc, what it does instead is overwhelm you with multiple storylines and of course the sheer brutality of it all, including obviously multiple character deaths, which brings me to my main point. I'm going to make a parallel with One Piece's Marineford arc, for example. That arc culminated with the death of a very important character, and that death was so impactful because it was isolated and it was very delved upon and had multiple ramifications on the story. And for example, on Naruto's Great Ninja War arc, more characters died, but they were also very relevant and had a more lasting impact. When you kill off a character, especially a well-liked character in a story, you get this emotional impact, but at what point does killing additional characters wield diminishing and diminishing returns? Nanami's death was impactful because number one, he was a very strong sorcerer, so even if he was a few tiers below Gojo, he was still very capable himself, and number two, because he was very well liked by both the audience and the characters, acting as a mentor figure to Yuji, and dare I say, because he was weaker than Gojo, he was the much better mentor and figure to look up to. So Nanami's death hits us on two fronts, the power scale front like, oh no, he was strong and he was killed, so these enemies are very strong, how will they deal with them? And the emotional front like, oh no, we like this character, how will Yuji cope with this mentally? And this isn't, of course, the first time that Mahito puts his dirty hands on someone, going all the way back to season 1. I've seen from certain comments that some people hate Mahito. Personally, I think that he's a great villain. He's just despicable and pure evil, and not only is he evil, he enjoys being evil. His moans of happiness while he's inflicting pain on Yuji are both hilarious and terrifying. So then comes Nobara into the picture, when Yuji is already at his breaking point from the guilt caused by Sukuna's actions and the sorrow from losing Nanami. Mahito goes and just crushes Nobara's eye socket, and this is when I think it maybe got a little bit too much. While Nobara's death was very shocking, which was definitely what the author was going for, to me it felt misplaced, like it was unnecessary in the grander scheme of things. Mahito's deranged evil actions can only go so far in terms of us hating him as a character and wanting Yuji to beat him. I don't think that Nobara's death did anything for him as a villain. He already capped his evil ceiling with Nanami's death, and Nobara's death did pretty much nothing, at least for me. So while there was quite a big emotional impact from Nobara's death, because I quite liked her as a character, she was much more badass, interesting and relatable as a female lead than most of shonen female protagonists, I don't think it did anything for me in terms of Mahito's heelish actions. To me, I have a bit of mixed feelings because I'm thinking mostly about what could have been. This could have been one of the most memorable moments in Jujutsu Kaisen, a very impactful scene that people would talk about for years to come, and instead I think it got a bit lost in the shuffle. Her loss was, in my eyes, cheapened or seen as less important because it wasn't an isolated incident, it was just something else in the vortex of storylines that is the Shibuya Arc. If the author did have the intention of dispatching Nobara, because let's be real, she's not dead and we have seen characters come back to life in this very arc, so I'm thinking she's coming back eventually, I think that he probably should have done it in the next arc or a few arcs down the line, but somewhere where it was more of an isolated incident and the moment had more time to breathe. It feels like this emotional moment got overshadowed by all the stuff that's happening. Just to recap, in the last few episodes we've had, for example, Mean Daddy coming back, Mean Daddy peacing out again, Fushiguro summoning Satan, Sukuna having a barbecue battle, and Nanami and the gang getting pounded by a shrimp, and then Nanami just dying at the hands of Mahito. So there's so much stuff and I didn't even mention everything. Finally, I'm not one of those people that resents authors for killing off characters. I think that's extremely silly. It's their story, they do what they want, and ultimately, if I'm not enjoying their story, I'll just stop watching. So while I do question the decision, I think that Nobara had a lot of potential, I'm not going to cry about it, because I'm also still hoping that she comes back in some fashion. So while I do think it's a bit weird to remove her from the picture so early, I think it will be fine ultimately. I hope. So I'm still loving Jujutsu Kaisen, I've gotten used to the insanity by now, I do hope there are still some characters left for season 3, but besides that it's been very fun to watch this. So what did you think about Jujutsu Kaisen's latest episodes? Do you think that Nobara's death, or shall I say removal, was a bit premature, or do you think it was fitting for the Shibuya arc? Leave it in the comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe and all the good stuff, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Ciao!